We are again on a podcast interview with our very own Jodi Blomberg. Jodi is a part of our board of advisors. She's been a part of the community for a while now. We're doing some exciting work together this year as well. And I compelled her to come on the podcast and do a little bit of a career reflection and catch up on what she's doing today, especially in some exciting areas connected to GenAI and LLMs. But I'm not going to get ahead of ourselves. So first of all, Jodi, welcome back on the show.
Thank you for having me. It's been a few months.
Yeah, right. And so Jodi, when you and I started our original conversations, you were still with waste management. And then you attended one of our master classes. We did a podcast interview soon after you did a career transition, but we did not reflect on what actually happened. And so maybe you could bring us all up to speed. What happened? How did you move from waste management to now Cox Automotive, and what your mandate is?
Sure. I was the head of data science before at Charles Schwab, so really focused on the customer journey, digital properties, right? The customer experience is one of the main products that Schwab offers. They take good care of their customers. Waste management was a completely different world of, landfills, truck drivers, like an extremely physical workspace product, which I think I've said before has super fun problems. Cox has a bit of both. They own websites. They also own technicians who fix trucks, who are at auction sites where people are walking around. And so really nice variety of problem set. It's a collection of companies in the automotive space. It was attractive for that reason, right? Just a wide variety of set. And also just a really different setup organizationally. I think data science teams, there's a question, should they live in product? Should they live in tech? Should they live in the business? Where should they live? And I think we have a really interesting and so far pretty useful setup here.
Mm. And it's interesting that one thing that just kind of emerged in the community completely organically is that I get emails sometimes from you guys that said, hey, Les, I see that you're connected, worked with this team. I'm maybe looking for another team, another opportunity. Can you tell me maybe about their organizational structure? Can you make an introduction, right? So I know that it's exciting always when you've already done great work that was recognized, and now you earn the opportunity to work on bigger and better things. So this is exactly, we just did a podcast I mentioned with Kate Goodine from now Shutterstock, how she moved from Expedia to Miro, and then now over at Shutterstock, the exciting things that she gets to work on. And I remember when we had our initial conversation, waste management was typically the kind of brand that once we had that combo, I started to notice them everywhere around me. They were kind of just hidden in the background, but now, of course, waste management. So is Cox a similar company? Is Cox something that you can observe every day, or what is the value proposition at Cox? And I'm asking it because I know that it's kind of have a fascinating history, and the intersection of the automotive industry and analytics is a specifically interesting one.
Yeah, it's really a collection of companies, right? All in the automotive space. But think about on the things that people probably touch are more like Kelley Blue Book, the price of a car, right? They may touch that site. The dealer is going to touch us on things like autotrader.com and dealer websites that they build. There's a car auction where actually a bunch of cars are bought and sold across the country. How does a dealer fill their lots? Where do they get rid of cars that they want to sell? We facilitate the private transactions, you and I buying a car. And then on the fleet side, that's more about in mobility. Those are emerging areas where we're fixing it, like an Amazon truck that's broken down on the side of the road, or a semi truck somewhere, or the sort of third pillar of that is also in the EV battery space. We know EVs are an emerging market, so we own a company that actually recycles the EV batteries. So really just a collection of companies. I probably didn't do it all justice. There's also moving cars in there. But we have this, that means we have this super rich data set on cars and vehicles, where they've been transacted, where they've been repaired. We know a lot about a transaction from end to end. And that gives us a unique opportunity to build stuff with data that only we have.
Oh, that's really cool. And Actually, on the podcast, we'll have one of the fresh alumni from the masterclass who is the chief data officer from Turo, Albert. Yeah, shout out to Albert. He's coming on the podcast as well. So Turo is obviously a new company. It's kind of like the Airbnb of car rentals. If I wanted to just summarize it into something that everyone can understand. And then on the other hand, one of the other graduates was the general manager of business transformation and analytics over at Toyota, just like a classic manufacturer. And I know that in the automotive industry, analytics has been applied in all kinds of different ways. In the case of Cox, and correct me if I'm wrong, but even the business model was revolutionized and the offerings as well. There were all kinds of intersections between the product innovation there and how they integrated analytics, even in the customer offerings, right?
Yeah, I mean, for you and I, Kelly Blue Book is at the end of the day, it's a prediction, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's a very classic use of analytics and data is what is the correct price for a car, given what we know about it. But of course, AI and algorithms and data are infused in all of our products because that's what we can offer to a dealer and that's what we can offer to an OEM. And that's part of our offer or infused in part of the solutions and the software solutions that we build. And the same will be true for GenAI. There will be things we build for our customers and there'll be things we do for ourselves.
Mm-hmm. So I'm also finding myself caught up in this fascinating relationship between analytics and data science. Now, someone from the outside wouldn't even observe that there's a difference. Analytics, data science, right? But yeah, I mean, obviously for the layman. Now, for me, I see the data science teams and analytics teams kind of collaborating in these big companies. So maybe for some of those people, but because I know that a bunch of business leaders are also listening often, because they want to understand more about analytics, right? So how would you, maybe as we're transitioning into the topic at hand, what is the meaningful difference between analytics and data science from your perspective? And then how does that manifest itself in your role and your team and the skill sets and the work that they do in the company?
Sure. I mean, every company is organized differently. So I've owned different parts of that data science spectrum, which is pretty wide. That's a big, it's a big word right now to cover a lot of stuff. So in my current role, and actually this is also true at Waste Management, we had a lot of stuff we did not do the analytics, which is such an important part of running a business, right? To help understand why something's going on or what's happening. We rely on analytic teams to do that. They're out embedded in the business. My team's charter is a little different. We generally are trying to develop models that go into a product or go to a customer or somehow go internally, right? They're going to be deployed. I'm part of the product and technology organization. So my charter is very different. I generally don't take a ton of ad hoc requests. We do occasionally because, of course, we have areas of expertise and we're here to serve the company. We're a center of excellence, but that's not really our charter. Our charter is to build things that go into production and do the right kinds of R&D to help shape product direction when necessary.
Mm-hmm. So with data science and now with GenAI and LLMs, when you joined Cox, was that already a part and an integral part of the conversation and your mandate in the role, or was it during the time when it just became the talk of the town, really?
Hey, we're still figuring that out right now. In all seriousness.
Yeah.
So my team does not build all of the GenAI solutions. I've heard other companies do this differently where data science builds them all. We act like a center of excellence. So first of all, we're a little bit of a tiger team. We're out trying to get other engineering teams started on their GenAI solutions. We have a GenAI committee. There are other hurdles to entry, but we act as enablers. Because it is a third-party model, we're not going to be tuning the hyperparameters. You don't necessarily need a data scientist to do your GenAI. You really need only data science to enable two things for you. I think one is kind of prompt engineering, center of excellence sort of activities. And the second is evaluation activities. Here's something I think we're pretty good at. We're pretty used to watching our models and see how they do. I don't think we treat GenAI any differently than that. I think that is an unpopular opinion. Sometimes feels like governance, right? But when something goes wrong, I suspect I might get one of those phone calls. So I'm pretty interested in it.
Absolutely. So yeah, you have a skin in the game in that way. So how do you see this? Because as you said, we're capturing something that's happening real time. It's like super fast. It's monumental, foundational. So what have been some of your observations about how the topic of Gen AI is being treated within the business, the kind of requirements that are kind of implied sometimes dictated, and how, in response to that, the data analytics teams and the data science teams approach this challenge, because it's definitely a question that a lot of people are asking themselves.
I mean, I've never been more popular, so that's bad. Everyone has an idea, right, on how they want to use GenAI. It's a very shiny object. It deserves to be. It's part of a toolkit. It does some pretty amazing stuff. What I'm generally pushing pretty heavily is I do believe GenAI will become prolific throughout our company. Those use cases will be small, so it will take a while to add up to a lot of money, right? If you're doing an efficiency play with GenAI, maybe you have $1 million use case, maybe you have a $0 use case. I mean, you may or may not be able to show that in your bottom line, versus if you put GenAI in a product you're going to customer market with and you charge more, right? That's more of a revenue generating. I think traditional AI or predictive AI, pick your favorite word, on our structured data at this point is still going to generate us more money. So I am heavily encouraging the use of GenAI for my own team as part of their toolkit when it makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And for all the other teams who are going to pursue GenAI for these efficiency, process automation, RPA on steroids, we are here to enable and help. But I don't necessarily have to build it all, because I view, if you have 40-ish sort of AI experts, for lack of a better word, right, which is what my team is, a COE, you may not want them working on the $1 million efficiency case. You might want them working on the, $20 million new revenue case.
And when you say AI experts, just to clarify, it's not the typical LinkedIn AI expert. When you say with the AI expert,
people who know machine learning and
no, we actually mean people who are AI experts building things.
I mean, builder, yeah. So for them, also GenAI, like there's right. These are third-party models, which is great. We should use them. We shouldn't try to build our own. Generally speaking, I had a use case where fine-tuning makes sense yet. But I mean, they're an expert in all the other stuff. And I see a lot more solutions coming together that are sort of Gen AI plus AI, right? Where we do some predictions on structured data. We may use we may use Gen AI to feed that output out, or we use Gen AI as part of our toolkit to standardize some unstructured data, put that with the rest of structured data, and make a prediction. So that's a great use for me of Gen AI, but I am trying to be pretty disciplined and encourage teams to be really disciplined about what that ROI curve looks like, because we do that for everything else we do. Why would we not apply the same to GenAI?
So a quick question here, again, and we're gonna zoom in on multiple levels here. But so right now, the data science team at Cox, I mean, Cox haven't always had a data science function and team. So that kind of came with the evolution of the company and the data science gaining more importance and then earning that position. Right now, how autonomous is that a team? Is it like embedded in the business across the organization? Is it its own entity and unit? And then you being the VP of data science for your remit, like what is your job? Is your job for that function to be thriving and be a very good company within a company, right? Is that your mandate?
Our mandate is horizontal. So I live in the product and tech org. They are aligned by business, and we are there to serve all. We have sort of two purposes. One would be to build solutions that could be used by multiple products. That's for sure our North Star, is like, can I build something once? Like the value of a car. There may be variants of that. It might be the dealer's value. It might be the, you and me buying the car value, like Kelly Blue Book. But that's a thing you want to do once as a company and spread across all those product and tech orgs. So there's certainly models we're trying to build that are horizontal. That's our best value proposition, right? Repeatability. Of course, we end up building point solutions because sometimes a product needs a very specific thing, and we start to develop areas of expertise, maybe in optimization or in pricing or fraud or things like that, right? And so that is a sort of secondary mandate. But if they're really valuable to the company or to the, they create new revenue, we're here to serve those product lines. And so then it's really just about balancing the third bucket, the R&D bucket, which is sometimes we get asked by the business, not even product, right, to help them figure out like this sort of art of the possible, what's feasible there. That's important work. But I spend a lot of time educating people too, that if we fail at those, that's a good thing. That means you didn't spend money putting it on your product roadmap. Or, hey, our data is not good enough to do that thing, or you need to, fix these data problems before you can get that on a product roadmap. And so trying to figure out how to split our time across that. I spent a lot more time thinking about what's our margin on certain products and what we charge for that. And so we want to think about where we spend our time. And does that commiserate with the way that we make money? Because ultimately that's what I get paid for.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And then actually what I've heard from others as well is that it can be quite a challenge to make sure that your team always, they have their eyes on the prize of what's important and what needs to be prioritized when you're working on cool things and on things that you love and know and you're good at. It's easy to kind of get sucked into that little world. And it's important to maintain that relationship with the business realities and maybe even this conversation around Gen AI. So what are the business realities around Gen AI? And my question actually, because we don't really know, but historically with new things, new shiny objects, which have their appeal and also their utility, because it's shiny, you don't need to make it more shiny. People already come, so that's great. So that part of the job is done. But then how do you think that this should be approached? And really these checks that are being written now and soon coming due. So maybe we can dive into that a little bit.
I do think the check is coming due. I mean, it should, right? Like we had a big hype cycle and now people want to know where their money is. And the message I give people a lot is a lot of Gen AI are efficiency plays. You don't have to go to B school to know that creating products that create new revenue are going to be easier to show up in your bottom line than creating efficiency plays, because maybe you put people to a higher productivity, but you won't see that in cash flow, or it's harder to see.
Harder to prove too.
Yeah. It's you're not necessarily wiping out a whole team, or you're not necessarily, I don't really want that to be my job. Wipe out entire teams. Yeah. Like that would not get me out of bed in the morning super happily. But that's why the value proposition is going to be a little lower. And so at least for us, we're trying to ask people for three things when they build a Gen AI use case. One, do you really have the data to support it, right? A lot of things we do are RAG architecture, so we're bringing our own data to the table. So one, are you even feasible? Like, do you have that data? Two, what's your value proposition? Like, what's the point in doing it? Are you here to make money? Are you trying to make someone more efficient? How are you going to count that, right? Having them think about that. And three, like, do you have willing humans? So the problem with a lot of efficiency plays, and Gen AI is going to have this problem as well, is if you hand Gen AI to a technician or a call center employee, regardless of your industry, if you hand it to a frontline worker who feels that you are using AI to replace their job, I wouldn't expect your adoption rate to be super high and happy. So we talked a lot about your ROI curve will probably take longer than you want, because you're going to do change management, you're going to do user adoption, you're going to do education. Somebody in the business really has to sign up to do all that stuff to make some of these work. And I think that not everyone thinks about that up front, and it's more fun. It's fun to write. It's fun to Gen AI and it's fun to automate something, but because we're going to be flooded with these examples and we need to prioritize, we need to decide which ones are really going to move the needle and which ones, finance can report on later, because that's ultimately the goal.
So that's so cool, because one of the biggest challenges that some of our members have, and it's an ongoing issue, and maybe in one company you don't have it and then the next one you do, is that often the data science or the analytics teams can become the data science box or the report vending machine, right? So when it's anything but the trusted business advisor that you actually want to become, which also enables you to generate the most value, but also to get the most recognition, and then being able to provide to your team opportunities to actually utilize their talents and build better careers and all that good stuff.
Yep.
And when you, instead of just automatically fulfilling orders or taking technical parameters, kind of reinforcing that undesirable position, you start to ask business questions, because those questions those are just business questions. They're not data science questions specifically, right? Like adoption of any kind of solution in the business, any kind of tool in the business, right? So if manufacturer companies, I'm sure that when they build different solutions, the adoption rate of the users is just as important as with a
Yes.
data center analytics solution.
Yeah.
I mean, you've probably seen that on the ground, even at Waste Management, right? Because you
Oh, of course.
believed in being on the front lines. I know I applauded
Oh,
that.
I
Yeah. And so with that being said, the adoption, so you become that trusted business advisor. How did you develop that instinct over the years that
do.
that's where you need to steer the conversation, and how did that develop? Maybe you can even share a few stories with us if you have some.
I mean, I learned like everyone else learns when you
Mhm.
screw it up. Right? I think I started out as a data scientist, and um, I think naively and really optimistically hoped we'd build stuff and everyone would just love it, right? I started out building tax fraud solutions, but the actual user of a tax fraud solution is a frontline worker, as a caseworker. They may or may not have a college degree. They're not super interested in whether you built a neural network to tell them whether that was fraud, and they're super interested in why, right? They've got to actually decide if this is ID theft, for example, in tax fraud. I learned a lot of lessons by actually doing the training and education of that solution. So it was a data science driven software solution, but I chose to be the user educator more than one time because I learned so much talking to them, and I really learned my lessons about like, oh, we probably should have asked them before, like, how would you want to use that, or what's your process today, right? Or I've also had failures like where you build a solution for a call center and then you realize the data doesn't come in at the same cadence as the model that you built. Like you can't do it in the time frame that the thing's actually going to happen. And I think um, it's super disappointing for a data science team, of course, to build stuff that can't get to prod because of stuff we should have known before. And those are all business questions. And I'm not a product manager. I don't necessarily go hunt all those answers, but I do ask them of the product people. My product partners should be able to answer those questions. And, or if they don't, go find it. I mean, they may or may not know what to ask either, but the core of it's really simple, which is AI and GenAI are here because we are going to automate some part of a process or change the way someone does their job. If you do not understand how that works today, you probably should not start building anything. You need to understand this is my boots on the ground part too, right? Like you should go and see how it works so you can build something that's actually effective in the way that somebody's doing their job today. It's just more likely to be adopted.
Absolutely. And then how with this kind of developing business acumen, if you will, because that's what you have when you're in the profession and you're actually trying to build solutions that people love. Because that's ultimately actually what you want, for people to love what you build. Because when they love it, that means that it's valuable to them. It
Yeah.
means that they enjoy using it, and it means that it will also scale. So, for example, with scaling these solutions, how far do you think we are from these Gen AI driven solutions to scale to a level where it will be like a heavy hitter contender amongst all the currently available options right now? But it's a growth, and this is the part when we're just doing kind of projections and thinking about possibilities of the future. But it's an exciting conversation to be had.
Well, I just said it in a talk and I said it might not be true in 6 months. Everyone can test me later. I think two things. I think Gen AI solutions will be ubiquitous in user experiences. It will be in all the products we buy and probably products we build, right? Like it's just gonna be everywhere. And I mean that in a good way. So you might not even notice it's there. We're just gonna get used to interacting with products in natural language. So that's one way it becomes ubiquitous, whether I build or buy it. But my other prediction then is that I in so in some ways that makes it low value because it's going to become a commodity, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so somewhere down the line too, we're going to have to figure out the cost structure for scaling that. Like, and I think because of sustainability concerns, I suspect this will also be true. My guess is we're going to end up with a bunch of smaller specialized models than like ChatGPT does everything, and maybe you're going to see a company fine tune a like, well, this is a chatbot that only talks about automotive, but it's really good at it, right? Or this is because then your compute will also be smaller. Or there's this, I think they're called one byte models, where they started like narrowing the floating point error on some of the parameters, and then your compute's a lot smaller. I feel like we're going to have to get to a smaller compute space to get to that ubiquity space.
Mm-hmm.
But then it becomes kind of a commodity, and I don't think that's a bad thing. I don't really see AI on structured data becoming a commodity quite yet. So, I don't know that you can go buy dynamic pricing, but it's going to be built for your business probably, right? Or it's going to be built by your internal team. We may get there. I think we'll just slowly carve off. AI will become more and more ubiquitous. But right now, I just see it becoming really ubiquitous in that user experience, right? It's a way that we deliver. Like, look, Instagram, put that thing on top, right? They have a user experience that's Gen AI driven. The thing that makes all the money, the recommender engine, is still probably a good old machine learning model on structured data about recommending what you want to see next. They didn't change that part, right? You just changed the user experience part. I suspect that's my theory on where the market.
And these specialized AI, so for example, AI that's just really good at automotive. So that was one of the early times when the whole ChatGPT became a thing, and that was 3.5 at the time, and marketing is over. Now it's just gonna be AI. Oh, like photo modeling is done because everyone will just musicians, they are done. Like everyone's done because basically Gen AI will replace it.
Already.
Everything, exactly. And then there are some funny use cases of how when people just absolutely 100% press the gas on that, how it could go wrong. Like that was this case where there was this AI generated marketing functionality. It was actually one of the BI service providers. I don't remember the name, but they implemented it and they released 700 blog posts in 2 days. Obviously, all of it AI generated. That just randomly hallucinated content because I thought, Gen AI powered will reach a lot of people, it will generate a lot of clicks, it will all that, right? Because that's what it is, and it was ultimately a scandal. So my point with it is when you actually start to scratch the surface, I found out both that it's actually more useful than I anticipated, especially because I end up using it on a daily basis just for random things. It kind of replaced Google search for me almost.
Perplexity is great.
Yeah, exactly. And it's my favorite note-taking machine. So it's like a almost like a brain dump how I use it. But very quickly also you can find out that you can't build anything sophisticated with it just yet. If, let's say we're on the creative front. So it's very helpful only to a certain degree. So at specific stages of workflows, I think especially in the beginning and maybe at the very end, but actually anything that, for example, we put out, anything that is just automated by AI, right? We could never reach that quality point that we would have been happy with.
No, I mean, I think I've read that 40% of content on the internet is already Gen AI created, and pretty soon that means LLMs are going to be training on the data that they created, and I think the world's going to get really boring.
Yeah, exactly. It's one of those. It's so funny because it's one of those consequences that if that happens, no one could have predicted it. It's just so new. It's like chaos theory applies here, where the smallest little change just results in something off the charts.
On the other hand, and this is going to put some companies out of business. Like Snowflake's come out with things like Doc AI, or like there's a bunch of technologies that will become super commoditized in a good way, right? Like you don't have to get an OCR reader, you don't have to hire that invoice reading company, you don't have, right? Like this stuff is super easy to use. You don't need a data scientist. You just do it. As that gets more sophisticated, I think that will automate a bunch of stuff that's super useful, and less like, oh, I got ChatGPT to say something, right? Like that's people do read invoices, they type them in, they like there's those kind of processes.
Absolutely, and actually it pushes out those players who are just relying on being a commodity, right?
Yes.
And not bringing that extra, whatever that extra is, and I think it will incentivize a lot of, when we say AI fueled entrepreneurship, when I say it, I mean that, right? That there will be a lot of movement which will incentivize good, unique voices, good, unique workflows, good, unique teams, achievements. So it's going to be a very exciting space. So a lot of times these are counterintuitive results because we're just unfamiliar with what's happening. I mean,
we don't, no crystal ball here, but
and then with AI, for example, I know that whenever something, so let me give you an example. We're recording now on Riverside, which is a very cool platform. we're not associated other than we're their customers, and it's super useful. You can just record something. The fundamental thesis is very simple and brilliant, is that instead of real time compressing the video feed, uploading it into the cloud or downloading it for smaller size but severely compromised quality, like for example Zoom,
Yeah.
they record the content first on the hard drive, and then it gets uploaded as we talk. And if it didn't finish during the recording, then after that too, so that if there are issues with the connection, it doesn't show up in the live feed. Great, fantastic, successful company, fantastic product. Started to introduce very aggressive AI fueled solutions, like for example, studio quality sound with a click, GenAI fueled, or magic clip finder. So you record a podcast, and they find the magic clips with the best topics and all that. None of it is anything close to. So if you use it, it just kind of messes things up. So yeah. So we just see that every space is trying to find the meaningful applications of GenAI. Yeah. And we're just finding out what kind of things that it can actually automate, at least on the short term.
Yeah. I think there's gonna be a lot of failures out there, right? That's the disillusionment part we're probably getting to, because there's probably too many people trying to do too many things that aren't useful. I definitely feel like I'm walking a tightrope at work, but it's one I walk all the time.
Sure, and
which is like,
it's a good place to be.
Stuff should we incubate where I don't quite see, but I have a value proposition to answer to, and so I'm always trying to figure out, like, on that R&D pipeline, like, where do we swim so we make sure that we're a little ahead of we're skating to the puck, so to speak. We're not missing on a big opportunity, but we also, like, we could chase all kinds of stuff that never makes the light of day, or doesn't make us competitive, or is GenAI for the sake of doing GenAI, or doing AI for the sake of doing AI because it's got such high interest. And I think it's something I think about a lot with our product portfolio. It's something I bounce against our margins on our products. Like, are we working on the right stuff at the right time that makes the right money for the company? I think everyone's going to have to answer to that value proposition. GenAI is not getting free pass. I don't know what CEOs are thinking. I think they're hoping it will be magic, and I have some doubts whether that will come. I think there are companies for whom that is going to be absolutely part of their value proposition, and there are a lot of companies where it will be part of their efficiency proposition, but it will not be like a revenue generator.
Do you think that those predictions that say that, in the future, the fact that because right now it can also be, I think, still something that differentiates you from your competitors, that no, we are doing this thing, but we are doing it powered by GenAI. So
I think you have to do it to be competitive in market today.
Exactly. So it is becoming a situation where it's actually not a differentiating factor anymore. It's just business as usual. Yep. So do you think that this will happen fast? This part of the
Actually, I think the part I haven't quite figured out what it's going to look like is, yes, I think it will be commoditized, because, like I said, we're both things we build for ourselves and things we buy, and it will be in everything. But then you're really going to have this, like, big overlapping Venn diagram of, like, do I have that product do that, or do I have this product do that, right? And I think that will actually be confusing in the market for a little while. Should I buy a GenAI thing that does this one thing, or I'll pick on Salesforce. Salesforce does a lot of things, so maybe they'll just drop their GenAI models in there. We don't need to buy best in breed. Like, I think piecing together all that technology will be a real challenge in 2025, 2026, trying to decide who you want to get your GenAI from and where, in your...
Who's your GenAI guy?
You have to talk to each other. Like, there's just... once it becomes sort of commoditized and ubiquitous, then all these things also have to talk to each other. And in fact, I left a meeting today where we, even in our own team, wanted to make sure that we haven't created any loops where we have, like, GenAI creating content that we later use GenAI to parse back up. We don't want to feed our own, engine. I think there's a bunch of opportunities for that out in the market.
Wow, that's really cool. That's actually very interesting. And this is all a new landscape. So what would your personal recommendation be for those leaders who are in similar positions to you, right? Either they are leading data science teams, maybe they're leading analytics teams, maybe they're leading both. Again, every company is different. A lot of the overlaps are infinite as well. But what would be your advice or pieces of advice for them to approach this topic for the rest of 2024?
I think there's an instinct on some of the data science teams to think like we should be building all of the GenAI as part of our toolkit. I think, like, I understand that instinct, but I also think because of the commoditization, I think it'd be best served to be enablers of GenAI, be good consultants, help people pick good use cases, but like don't do, right? Or hand out a little prompt engineering expertise. But like it's largely an engineering problem and just let the engineering teams run with it. It's not something I feel like data science needs to own, which not everyone will agree with me on. But because I think it's commoditized, I don't see it as the highest value work we could be doing. I think what I tell my team is GenAI is now part of your toolkit. You are still here at the end of the day to solve the big business problems, right? You are here to create products that make revenue. You're here to make our physical processes more efficient or help our, technicians do their job better. You're here to make this company money. And GenAI, if GenAI is part of the toolkit to do that, then we'll work on that problem. But it's not about gatekeeping a certain technology or not using another one. It's really about like what our charter is. And your charter, as always, is to make money for the company and support the business the best you can. And so I view it as part of the toolkit, but I also don't view it as something that we are the only people who need to do. I think prompt engineering is probably not a job in another 6 months. Like everybody does it.
Mm-hmm.
I may be very wrong about that, but I think.
But we're gonna check back.
There's going to be software tools for that, or there's going to be. I just think it's going to be commoditized, and that's a good thing. That just means that we can spread it around, use it more.
So, what would you recommend on the other side of this to those people who kind of are in the same position as you? They understand the landscape, and now they need to communicate with senior leadership who read the annual McKinsey $1 million PDF. And right on the first page, they told them that GenAI is the name of the game. That's how the winners and losers will be determined, which again might or might not be true to the degree of whatever.
I hand out McKinsey studies all the time also, actually. I'm not lying. Because their study says that $11 to $17 trillion will be added to the global economy using AI. GenAI will add 20% to the top of that. Just the smaller bucket. So if you want to revolutionize your business, you're going to need both, because companies are sitting on this huge sea of structured data, which GenAI is not that great at, and unstructured data. So unless you have a really high value proposition around your unstructured data, you are not going to go make $1 gazillion. I don't see how you do it on GenAI today. The other one I whip out that just came out that I think is really good for McKinsey is the cost of $1 development cost to $1 change management cost is typical for digital use cases. So your Instagram, you update your algorithm, your Facebook, if you're you on a website, you have a digital product, software as a service, you can add something. If it doesn't require a lot of change management, it's 1-to-1. Human, where we're changing what a human does, which is a lot of what a GenAI does, right? We're automating a process that a human touches, or we're out in a physical space, on average, $3 of change management for every $1 of development costs. So I'm really trying to get people to think about what kind of use case they have. Is it a 3x? Is it a 5x? Is it a 1x? Like, how long will it, because that extends your timeline. So longer to get ROI when you need high change management, and it also extends your costs, right? It makes your ROI smaller. And so having people with that mindset, I think, that's a McKinsey study too. Those are the two that I often cite because they kind of jive with my experience, candidly, which is like, yes, we should do this stuff. And when there's really low cost barrier to entry, like GenAI is worth $1 million. Great. We can get the $1 million back fast. Let's do it. But some of the AI and structured data, we got to change the process. So we're going to change the way someone does their job. It's going to take longer. So we should be more upfront with ourselves about when we'll get our money back.
And that's exactly. So, by the way, I'm obviously joking about McKinsey. It's super useful, even in this case, right? Because they actually have great.
CEOs read them.
Yeah, exactly. They have the name, they have the brand, but also they do have good information, and it's presented well too. Now, can they be always 100% correct? I think they even kind of try to sometimes stave off driving conclusions and try to be.
I mean, they're also selling a service, so I mean,
exactly. But
grain of salt. But I think those studies sort of resonate with the picture. I think that I see. They make sense to me.
And how do you observe the business atmosphere around this with actual business leaders now? If we look at that hype cycle, let's say a year ago, and then 6 months ago, and now, where do you think it's going?
I think excitement, at least where I'm working today, like we're still on the upward, we're still riding uphill, which is like so much interest, right? But I do think the fall will come back down just as quickly in that those checks are coming due for all the GenAI hype. And I think that's good. That's going to force the conversation that we want, which is what is the valuable thing we should be doing? What's core to our business? Or what do we have to do to stay in market? To your point, like we're going to have to put GenAI in solutions we go to market with because everyone else is doing it. You can't be behind for sure. But I think forcing a little more discipline on that conversation is going to be a good thing. Like I'm not excited to ride the train back down, but it probably will force the right kind of conversations. And from my perspective as a data science leader, you should be doing this the best of anyone. Like all of your AI use cases and all of your Gen AI that you use on your own team, you should have very clear view on the ROI of and documented and business cases because you should be setting the example. You're a center of excellence. You should be, when people fail or when they start failing, you can say, well, here's how we do it here. This is why we chose to do this, or this is how we calculate our ROI. I think if you're not a good example, you may ride the train back down as well.
Okay. Well, these are natural cycles anyways, and it's just good to anticipate if and whenever these things happen. But I think we can read the tea leaves because even though this is a very, very new thing in a very, very new environment that is rapidly changing, if we zoom out enough, we can still see the same patterns with human adoption, innovation. It tends to have the same shape and form. So, Jodi, this was a really cool conversation, and I'm glad that after recording the first one with you earlier this year, now building on that, we could kind of move from maybe strictly the past reflections and look at what's happening today and what can we do tomorrow with this particular topic of Gen AI, especially with all the myth around it. So I think it was a unique exchange with some great insights.
Well, thank you for having me. Gen AI is a hot topic. It's a very fun time to work in AI. I do joke that I've never been more popular, but I do mean it in that everyone's interest is high. I don't have to explain why we should be capitalizing on the value of our data. They're like asking for it. And so it makes it a really fun time to be in our line of work.
Absolutely. And we'll hear more from you as a Board of Advisors member. So until next time.
Thank you.